We have nothing to invent. We don't want to invent anything. We just want to be simply what our ancestors have been and done. And nevertheless, we are considered as being out. We claim, we defend ourselves, say, no, we are not out, we are genuine, we are authentic. And those who claim to be and who present themselves as the authentic, they say, no, these people, they are schismatics, they're out. I would say just this simple fact is very intriguing, should have a blinking effect on the alarm light. Well, it just shows that there's something wrong somewhere. And this something wrong for you personally, at least let's say the older generation and some of the younger, if you're here, it's because you have been shocked. There is a shocking element somewhere. You have been facing something where, despite all your attachment, all the principles who told you you have to be submitted, you have to be obedient, there's only one bishop in the diocese, there's only one parish priest in the parish, we have to obey, we have to submit. Something has been violent enough to push you to the decision to say, that can't be, or that's enough. And you have, so to say, gone out of this precise building, this church, which was the parish church, the Catholic parish church of this or that town. It does not mean that you have left the church. No. Precisely, you have gone out because you look for the church. Because suddenly you have realized that what was happening does not sound, does not look like what the church has to be. Not used to be, but has to be. Is. And the problem is that it's not only a history or a story at the parish level. You go a little bit higher, you go at the diocese, you go at the country level, you go to Rome, and everywhere you meet the same problem. Disorder, something which is not in order, but not just something superficial, something which touches to the life, to the existence, to the essence of the being Catholic. And this from the top to the bottom. We call it a crisis. There are many various different sides in this crisis. It's not just one point. When you look in the history of the Church, you find really fearful, terrible fights for just one point of the truth. You look at the first ecumenical council, Nicaea, they had to do with one erroneous theory, which was promoted by one man. His name was Arius. Call it Arianism. It was a claim that finally the incarnated Word of God was not the Word of God, was not God. So it was something grave, something serious, but it was only this point. All the rest was fine. And nevertheless, this very, I dare to call little, it was not little, point was severe enough to put more or less upside down the whole church for 70 years. It was a major crisis in the church because one point of the faith had been questioned by, he was not even a priest, he was a deacon, Arius. And you can look on and on and on, and you have all these, we call Christology, heresies, the heresies against Christ, which mark the beginning of the church till the Middle Ages. It's always one point at a time. And every time it's a big fight, it's a big thing. Now, well, it's all the points are again there. You have the whole collection. If you want, you would go into the museum, you would have, today's museum has the whole thing. That is, all the errors and heresies of the past, you have all of them. And worse. And worse. So, for some of you, if you're here, it's because, let's say, because of the liturgy. Liturgy has gone wild. You have soon seen maybe too many clown masses or things of the type, or you have seen our Lord mistreated, or maybe unknown, or you have realized that the Mass was totally empty. Liturgy. And you have people today, a certain number, who think that, okay, yes, the Christ in the church today, that's liturgy. And lets the Mass come back, and then everything is fine. Well, we have a Pope now. The Pope wants the old Mass to come back, so let's it come back, and then everything is fine. Because the problem was the Mass. Well, no, I'm sorry. The Mass is a problem, yes. But it's not only one problem, or the problem. It's a problem amongst others. In fact, if we look at what happened with Vatican II and after Vatican II, we see that the Mass has been the mean by which, in the practical way, the novelties of Vatican II have been brought into the life of the faithful. It's not so much by theories, it's by the practice. It's very interesting to see in the psychology that you end up by think the way you behave. And the communists, they have understood that. When the communists had to deal and have to deal with, let's say, people of principles, like us, they know that it's a waste of time to try just to discuss about these principles with us. We are strong on the principles, we are not going to give up these principles. So they're not going to work there. They are going to invite us to do something which is on the limit, but which easily could bring us out of our principles. In the facts, in the deed. We are still attached to the principles, but little by little, you end up by doing something which is hitting your principles. And after a certain time of this repetition, your conscience, the integrity of your personality obliges you to revise your principles. Look at what has brought the communion in the hands. Easy. They no longer believe in Jesus, in the host. The loss of faith in the real presence is easily brought back to the communion in the hands. It's a behavior. If every time you go into the chapel you kneel down, well, you don't kneel down in front of a piece of bread. You don't kneel down in front of an empty box. You kneel down in front of a person who is definitely not equal to you. This kneeling down helps your soul. It's your body who goes down on the knee, but it helps your soul to make an act of adoration, and this adoration you give it to God. You go to communion, you kneel down, you receive your Lord kneeling down, you are, so to say, at your place in front of God. And you are in a full action where the faith is directing your action. You have put yourself into this faith, into this adoration, by this kneeling down. And once you are on your knees, you will not receive your hand, your good Lord in your hands. You will receive on your tongue. You see, through a simple practice, they have managed to change the faith of thousands, of millions. And I may say, this new Mass has really been one of the major means by which the novelties of Vatican II have been brought in. One of the major novelties is called ecumenism. It's tricky, I may say, as the whole Council is tricky. When we say Vatican II, well, we have a kind of reflex. It's like as we say spider, something like that, or snake, crater snake, well, something like that. We just jump away with horror. We have fed this reflex, and we are right. I may say the same with the Mass, but we must pay attention not to remain there. From time to time, it's good that we know why we react like that. Why do we see so much evil in the Council? When we say ecumenism, what is so bad with ecumenism? Especially ecumenism, but all the other things too. They have good sides. They would never have been able to introduce these errors if they would be just 100% error. And the way they brought it in and the way they continue to bring in is a nice way. It's always nice to speak of peace, of being one, of remembering the desire, the prayer of our Lord to His Father that they all be one. It's a nice side. It's a very pleasant, attractive. More than that, it's one of our duties. Our Lord sent the apostles to the whole world, to all nations, that they may, all of them, hear the good word, the gospel, all these, what our Lord, the Savior, the one who wanted to save all man, yes, He came to the world because He wants to save all man. It's true. He paid for all of them. That's true. And so this idea, this universal idea, is there, is real. I may say it's genuine. And that's why this ecumenism is so tricky. You see, the worst errors are those who are vested with the most truth. because you swallow them much better. If you see a beautiful soup with 1 drop of poison and it's not written and it's not said, you only see and taste the good soup and you are ready to drink it. If you see something horrible at the side with a horrible smell, well, you're not going to approach it and you will never drink it. And the council is very tricky. This ecumenism is doing something fantastic. Something that never happened during 2,000 years of the history of the Church. It brings the faithful in having a positive view on the error. It was never like that, never. It's something like you bring a sick person to the doctor, someone who has broken his leg, and the doctor looks at your heart, looks at your eyes, at your head, and say, oh, with such a heart you're going to live 120 years. These eyes, wonderful. And the poor person says, I don't care, it's my leg. But all the rest is true. What the doctor said about the heart, about the eyes, are true. If you want to point some good things in the other religions, of course you can, and you will find these good things, and they are true. But that's not the problem. The problem is the broken leg. I like to compare the other religions to airplanes. And to say, let's suppose we go to an airport, we have an exposition of many kinds of planes. One is the Catholic plane. In fact, it's the only one which can fly. Because it's the only one who has all the elements necessary to fly. You have close by other planes who have almost everything. For example, the Orthodox plane, he has everything. There's only one little thing which is failing. It's the pilot. They have everything. They have all the engines, the wing, the fuselage, everything. No pilot. Now, by your own experience, let's suppose you sit in one of these planes and they announce you, well, we're sorry today, but the pilot is not going to make it. There will be no pilot. Do you stay in the plane? My experience is that at that time everybody stands up and leaves the plane. Because everybody knows that this plane is not going to start. You go a little bit further, you go to the Protestants. Well, they have a somehow major problem because some of the engines are failing. They don't have all the sacraments. They don't have what gives life and movement to the plane. So it's not going to fly. And you continue, you go to, I don't know, to the Buddhist. I think that their plane is something in paper. You cannot even get in. Their supreme vision is the nothing. So try to do something with the nirvana, with the highest nothing. And nevertheless, you look at the documents from the council, from after the council, And the council is capable, and the church now is capable of giving praise to all these things, to all these planes will never fly. It's a cheat. They cheat, and they pretend to do charity. I have another example, which I like too, is the train station. Well, you don't have so many trains here, but let's suppose you are in one of these beautiful stations where you have several trains. And you have some people there. Of course, if you go to the station, that means that you want to go somewhere. So let's suppose we are in Paris, in one of these train stations, and I want to go to Brussels. So what do? I try to find out which of these trains go to Brussels. Very curiously, I don't give too much importance to the color of the train, to the number of wagons it would have, even to the time. Well, the time is a factor, certainly, but let's suppose you have someone who tells you, I want to go to Brussels, and he's about to enter into the train which goes to Marseille. And you tell him, oh, you make a very good choice, you know, this first-class train is perfect, this high-speed train, that's a very, very good choice. Is that charity? Oh, I don't want to hurt him, you know. He seems to like so much that train, but he wanted to go to Brussels. Well, okay, Marseille, it's the other way, but it's exactly the opposite. That's what they do with their ecumenism. They tell to the people that being a good Protestant, that will lead you to heaven. And they go straight to hell. I say Protestant, I can use any other religion than the Catholic one, because there's only one who has the means to bring to heaven, and is the Catholic. And this language is no longer held in the Catholic Church. Let's suppose I would just have said what I've said now in any parish, church, or cathedral in the world. Guess what would have happened to me? But that's the Catholic teaching. Oh, I am uncharitable, I am hard, I am narrow-minded, I don't know what. No, that's the Catholic teaching, that's the Catholic faith. So why is it that now so many, or the immense majority, has totally switched off there? What was the mean? This new Mass has brought this change of mentality. Fantastic. This new Mass has been framed, has been really prepared to the details for that purpose. And they said it. It's not me who invents it. The inventor of the new Mass, Monsignor Bonini, almost at the very start of his appointment as the head of the commission who will prepare this new Mass, said, and it's in the Osservatore Romano, so it's official, he said, the prayer cannot be a scandal for the others. Prayer, that's the place where you are united, you come at peace to God. That's why we are going to take out of the Mass everything that might appear like the shadow of an obstacle to our separate brethren. Might appear the shadow of an obstacle, or might give the suspicion that it is something hostile to our separate brethren. And that's what they have done. And to be sure that they do it, they have invited Protestant experts, pastors, 6 of them. And they were present there in the making of the new Mass, to be very sure that they will no longer be hurt with this Mass. And the result is that this, for example, the one of Thésée, Max Turian, he said, once this new Mass was made, now the Protestants can use the new Catholic Missal for the Protestant service. It's theologically possible. In other words, the new Mass does correspond to the Protestant theology. Another professor of theology, Protestant, his name is Metz. You have another one, Metz, Professor Metz, who is a modernist Catholic. Okay, I speak of the Protestant. He said, now that the idea of the sacrifice has been shadowed, the Protestant can feel at home in this new Mass. He can go there. The Confession of Augsburg, these are Lutherans, in Strasbourg, has invited the Lutheran communities to use the Missal, the Catholic Missal, for their Protestant service. It's clear, it's plain. What has come out of the Vatican in 1969 is a Protestant Mass with a glued label, Catholic Mass. The content is Protestant. And the first publication of this Mass, that was very interesting. There was a definition of the Mass. It was in the introduction. This definition of the Mass is a heresy, not one, but 3. Is strong in one definition to make 3 heresies. That's pretty good. Coming out from the Vatican, not bad. When Cardinal Journet saw that, he went to see the Pope. It was Paul VI. Paul VI wept and said that he has signed without reading the text. He did not read the text. The new Mass has been published by a pope who had not read the text, the introduction at least. Well, it's even, I may say, better than that. The text itself of the promulgation is defectuous in Latin. The terms which should be there to make this a real promulgation of a new law is failing. They have put it in the translations in the various languages, but the Latin, which is the official text, it does not have them. That's the way the new Mass was introduced in the Catholic Church. It's full of defects, hidden, unknown. It's impressive. You just wonder, how is it possible? And if you ask me, but how is it possible? I can go on and tell you this and that happening, but somewhere I'm facing something which I will call a mystery. Because I'd like to tell you that's not possible. And I'm ready to say that many, many theologians, very serious people in the church, would have considered what we are living as impossible. Strictly impossible. Because of the promise of our Lord. Because He promised that the church will overcome all these kind of tempests, because the gates of hell shall not prevail. Because of the infallibility promised to the church and to the Pope. That was an argument used by Cardinal Castrillon in the conference in Münster, Germany. He said literally, Bishop Fellay claims that the new Mass is bad, but he's wrong. Because this Mass has been approved by the Pope, and so it's infallible. That was his argument. And it's written, you can go and check. And I may say many people are using this argument, of course, and many times we hear this kind of argument, taking either conclusion, either on one side or the other. That's what is really funny, not so funny, tragic, but very interesting. You have the same premise and radical different conclusions. The premise is the Pope is infallible. The second premise for some is the Pope said that. Conclusion will be that is infallible. The Pope is infallible, the Pope says that, so that is infallible. And I may say that's the Ecclesia Dei solution. The other way to board to get to that problem is to say the Pope is infallible, but obviously what is said there is wrong. Conclusion, it's not the Pope who said it. So if this person in Rome said it, which is in white, he cannot be the Pope. That's the sedevacantist. They both start with the same start. The Pope is infallible. So where's the problem? That starting with the same phrase, you come to so radical solutions. Well, obviously, the problem is, or comes from a distinction which is not made. They made it too simple with this phrase, the Pope is infallible. You need just there to introduce a distinction, and then everything comes back to order. And then you have the solution to these two errors. The Pope is not always infallible. How that? Well, because the Pope is not a machine gun. That was an argument I was facing once. Someone said, well, the infallibility, it's like a machine gun. You pull the trigger and the bullet goes. This, let's say, the one who had this argument said, even if you say, I don't want to pull the trigger, by the time you pull the trigger, the bullet goes. And my answer is, no, it doesn't work like that. The Pope is not a machine gun. He's not a revolver. The infallibility is not like pulling the trigger. The Pope is a human being, which means that he has a freedom. And Almighty God wants all the human beings to act using their reason, their will, and their freedom. Even when he promised them the highest gifts, like this gift of infallibility, he will request a free act on the side of the Pope. in such a way that if the Pope really does not want to make use of it, he will not. The same for the Mass. The priest has all the might, the tremendous might, to make God descend on the altar, to make out of a piece of bread the most precious body of Christ. He has this might. But if he does not want to go by the book, if you want to say, okay, I'm going to say a Mass, but this time instead of saying this is my body, I will say this is my head. Well, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. Or if he says, oh, wine. I prefer Coke. Or a piece of bread. Let's have cakes, some cookies. They do so. They break the thing. There will be no Mass. Or even this time, he says the word, he uses the matter, but he says, no, I'm not going to make it. No, think about that. If he does not bring the right intention to do what the Church does, nothing will happen, because he is free. He's a free being, and God wants these free beings to make use of their freedom. We are not machines. Even there, at the highest, when it goes about being infallible. It's a wrong understanding to think that the Pope would be infallible in everything. No. He has all the might to become and to be infallible, but he must make the right use of the right means. It's as simple as that. I tell you, I wonder how they can sleep in the Vatican. I remember a bishop saying, if we look at the Church and the aspect of the salvation of the souls, then it is a catastrophe. But can we have any kind of other look on the Church than this one? And look, here, listen to what the bishops say, to what the priests say. They no longer speak about the salvation of souls. They speak about money, about politics, about social affairs. I just wonder when you have heard an official person in the Church speak about salvation of souls. Or better, about hell. Tell me, when did you hear these words for the last time in the official Church? In India, we had a seminarian who had made 7 years of seminary. And he made in retreat with us, and he said, it's the first time I hear about hell. 7 years of seminary, never heard that word. Well, even better, I know of priests who have lost their office because of that word, because of one sermon on that topic. A Swiss parish priest, I know his name, has seen his position as a parish priest terminated after a sermon on hell. I know another one who told me personally that he had this idea to speak about hell. Oh, it went fast. In the 2 coming days, he was called to the archdiocese, to the bishop. What do I hear, Father? You spoke about hell? Well, it appears to be in the catechism. The bishop became mad, smashed his feet on the table. Father, I tell you, what you have to tell to the faithful is what pleases them. I just guess that's the new gospel. And so many stories of the like. So many. It's really striking. What are they doing? And even when they deal with us, what is really their preoccupation? Well, there's one point I can guarantee you. They deal with us because we bother them. To a point that they are obliged to deal with us. I don't know why, but it seems that wherever we go, we have a terrorizing effect. It's impressive to see the violence which we cause where we put our steps. I even said it to the Cardinal Castrillon. I said we experience something really, really impressive. We see division everywhere, even in our own families, but wherever we go, we settle, not even settle, we just approach and show our nose, and immediately the parish priest, bang! Excommunication, an enormous speech from the pulpit. There, they suddenly get out with all their old weapons. All the bishops, oh, we have stories, really, really noticeable. Like this one of our priests was invited by a parishioner in San Salvador. He went 1 week there. He visited, said the Mass, of course, and there some faithful were invited. This little visit of one priest, the first visit in that country, San Salvador, caused an emergency meeting of the Episcopal Conference of the Bishops of the San Salvador. In Lithuania, we ordained one priest and we started a priory. Now, before starting this priory, we had 2 chapels. In one chapels, visited once, twice a month, we would get up to between 8 and 10 faithful. And the other one, oh, the double, maybe 15. Now that was too much for the Lithuanian bishops. They couldn't bear it. They made a general condemnation in all parishes of all Lithuania. There was a declaration which was to be made of excommunicating, of condemning the society. You see, there's absolutely no proportion. Well, but in fact we have to thank them because they made the most tremendous publicity you could ever expect. It's a kind of negative publicity, but it works. And I could continue. It's really, we wonder, but what's happening to them? Why are they so wild when we appear? Oh no, they don't like us. A vicar general in Lithuania told one of our priests, well, the bishops have done like that because they only fear that everybody will go to you. Well, you know, it's the same in France. They also fear. And that's why they behave. And as long as they think they can smash us, they try to use the big hammer, the big threat. And when they suddenly realize that it does not work, what do? Well, An example, Moscow. The Bishop of Moscow tells Cardinal Sodano, who is in visit there to bless the church, Polish church in Moscow, I have a problem here in Moscow. Society of St. Pius X. What should I do? And Cardinal Sodano, the clever, he already knows from Rome, shut up. Don't say a word. If you open the mouth, they will respond and the situation will be worse. Well, the Bishop of Moscow did not follow the advice. He told him, in the instant when Rome is taking us again, the fight will be in the church. He looked at me and said, no. Well, look, they have not even started to bring us, so to say, back. They only talk of bringing back the Mass, which we had requested in 2000, and the fight is already there, and a beautiful fight. We could already start a new Agatha Christie novel, with the name Motu Proprio. Since over a year, we hear it's about to be published. Well, in fact, it's even a little bit before, because before the end of the Synod on the Eucharist, which happened in October 2005, one of the secretaries of this Synod was persuaded 1 week before the end of the Synod. He said it. He expected the document granting the freedom of the Mass to be published at the end of this Synod, that is 1 week later. And 1 week later, what happened? Nothing. Well, not exactly nothing. We would call it a torpedo. A torpedo which had been prepared during the summer by the secretary of the congregation for the liturgy, for the divine worship. This torpedo is a 7 pages document, note, internal to the Vatican, so you will never see it. And this note is signed by the cardinal prefect of the Congregation for Liturgy and its secretary. Fundamentally, the letter says to the Pope, you can't give the freedom of the Mass because this Mass does no longer exist. It has been abrogated by the new Mass. Well, the writer of this torpedo has been torpedoed. He has been catapulted Bishop of Assisi, kind of promotion. But the president is still there. And the president, Cardinal Arinze, is still holding his positions. Beginning of this year, the second wave of the German bishops come to Rome for the visit, Visita Limina. And of course, they go also to the liturgy, and they very clearly say, we don't want this motu proprio. And Cardinal Arinze answers, and me neither. And he grabs a new missal. This is our baby. Responsible for the liturgy in the church is a traitor to the Pope. And the Pope knows it. The proof? The last time Cardinal Rinze has seen the document, which we call the motu proprio, was last June. Since then, he's out of that project. I tell you these little stories because you will see, we'll try to see a little bit what's going on. What is going on is a Pope who has known the Curia for 20 years, who knows how it works, and who has terribly suffered from the way it works. The way it works, which had been instituted by Paul VI, which had reformed the Curia, which had transformed the Curia, which was under the control of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which has as a name Holy Office, which head was directly the Pope. This has been transformed by Paul VI. And instead of the faith governing all what happens in the Vatican, it was from Paul VI on the Secretary of State. In other terms, the politics. And everything, whatever happens in the Vatican, goes through the Secretary of State. And the whole pontificate of John Paul II, who did not like to govern, but to travel, to be pastoral, happened this way. The big boss in Rome and in the governing of the Church is and was the Secretary of State, Cardinal Sodano. As I say, Cardinal Ratzinger has suffered a lot of this situation, has been frustrated many times because things of importance, which should have received the okay, the green light from the, of course, the doctrine of the faith, has just passed out, let's say, been published without this check from the faith, but just from the politics, which is very serious, very serious. For example, the new way of electing the Pope. And so you have a Pope who knows that, who knows how mighty this Secretary of State has become, and who tries to get out of the trap. How does he do that? By making shortcuts, by bypassing the Secretary of State, by talking directly to the other cardinals responsible of the dicasteries. And of course, when you do so, when you are working yourself against the institution, it's a problem. Because the institution is still there, you have still people who are there who say, why are we there if the Pope does not use us? And so it causes a lot of discontent, a lot of reactions, a lot of rumors, and of sabotage. There were already enough, but now there's more. And nevertheless, you ask, but how could the Pope govern when he's blocked by all these lobbies? There's a real problem there. The Pope is in a state which is almost ungovernable. He has a very, very difficult task there. And I may say, of course, it appears that he will manage to change that only if he changes the people. But what do you do when the people don't go? You would say, well, let's call the Swiss Guards and good pinch. Well, I spoke of Cardinal Sodano. the announcement of the replacement of Cardinal Sodano happened last June, 1 year ago. The normal way to change the Secretary of State is Cardinal so-and-so, Secretary of State, is finishing his office, and tomorrow the other one, the new one, it comes in. And bye-bye, thank you. We put the seal on the office, and that's done. Now, for this one, it was not exactly like that. In June, it was announced that Cardinal Sodano will finish his office on the 15th of September. July, August, September, 3 months. 3 months for the former Secretary of State to clean the place, to make disappear all who would be embarrassing, bothering, whatever you want. That can't be. Okay, now we come to the 15th of September. The new Cardinal, Cardinal Bertone, new Secretary of State, arrives. Well, there's a little problem. Very little problem. The office of the Secretary of State is still occupied by the former Secretary of State. So there is no place for the new Secretary of State, who will find finally a place in the Vatican Gardens. It's true. There is there a building, the Tower of St. John, and that's where he is. He is not in the Secretariat of State, because in the Secretariat of State remains the former Secretary of State. How do you want the Church to be governed? And they support one another. Marini, the MC, responsible for the liturgy of the Pope, is a pure modernist. Cardinal Medina wanted to introduce at the end of the new Editio Typica of the new Mass, he wanted to put as an annex the Tridentine Mass. Already then, it's a few years ago now, he wanted to add there to say, well, it's still the Mass of the Catholic Church, but someone intervened and blocked it. It was Monsignor Marini, the MC of the Pope, John Paul II. And he hates the new one, who loves old things. And nevertheless, I was told personally, well, guaranteed for the 6th of January 2006, he's gone. Well, now we are after Easter, almost Ascension, soon Pentecost 2007, and he's still there. He has been nominated 2 times Bishop of Pescara. He has refused. He has been nominated nuncio in Switzerland. He has refused, and he's still there. How can it be? So, yes, you have understood. The Pope does not have so much power. Well, his secretary said it this way. The power of the Pope is like that. About the surface of a cover of a letter. That's it. Hard. He has a hard time. And now in the coming months, he will have to replace 43 important offices, places, jobs. You may consider that as the decisive point of his pontificate. If he manages to put in place good people, you can hope that there will be some changes in the Church. if he's forced to continue with the establishment, the nomenclatura, we just continue the way we are. Let's say, I don't say we, but I say the church. So it's determining. So we better pray. We better pray that the good Lord gives enough strength and a good fist to the Pope that he may really do the real changes he needs to make. I have heard that Cardinal Levada is foreseen as the future Cardinal of New York, which would happen in the coming months. Well, we will see. We have heard so many things that I just give it like that. You take it as you want. If you like it or no, you don't, it doesn't matter. Yes, it is a pretty chaotic situation in which we are. And just because the Pope has certain tendencies towards conservatism, towards the old liturgy, yes, there are certain points where he would like to make some corrections. And just because of these little points, he is already totally paralyzed. Imagine someone who would really make a great reform. He would be dead just before beginning. So this motu proprio, so is it going to come or not? I just guess that that's one of your questions. The only answer I can give you is, well, please, on that question, follow, that's an advice I give you, follow the method of Saint Thomas, the apostle. The one who said to the other apostle who said, we have seen our Lord Jesus Christ risen from the dead. He said, first I touch, then I believe. There is still some hope that it will come. Why? Because you can consider as certain that the Pope does want to give this freedom. And I may say, he would like to give a total freedom. Now, we have enough indications to say that this document is not giving the total freedom. I've been told of a discussion with Cardinal Arinze, who wanted to impose for a public mass at least 100 faithful. At that moment, the Pope told him, shut up. In a few years, we will not have so many for the new Mass. And both have been told that, so they have gone down to 30. What seems to be interesting is that it's something like the reverse of 88. In 88, they say the bishop can allow the old Mass. And this time they will say the bishop can prohibit the old Mass. So he's still the boss, but the reverse. First time they said the old Mass is prohibited, but you can get the permission. Now they will say it's allowed, but you can get the prohibition. Okay. We'll see what that will end in what that will change in the field. It can change many things. But I tell you, if I would be one of these modern bishops, I would not at all fear this motu proprio. Why? Because very recently, the Pope just gave all the power to the bishop on matters of liturgy. It's in this very recent text, the post-synodal exhortation about the Eucharist. On the number 39, it is said that the responsible for the liturgy in the diocese is the bishop, who is the only pastor, who is the responsible for the unity, for the peace of liturgy in the diocese. So he has all things in the hand to do whatever he wants. And publicly, on Holy Saturday, a bishop in northern Germany said, really publicly, I don't care about this motu proprio. In this diocese, I am the boss. The Pope is the Pope of Rome. And many will act like that. And if the Pope does not come with a hammer, it will be very interesting to see how things will develop. The only thing I hope to, so to say, deblock the situation is the courage of faithful, of priests who would like to have this Mass and who will stand against their bishop, saying, listen, the Pope has given us the permission, now you have to obey the Pope. And we go on. And then there will be a dispute, then they will have to go to Rome, and then we will see what Rome does. Till now, Rome officially supports the bishops. In the back door, it seems that sometimes they try to say to the bishop, listen, be a little bit kinder. But officially, they always support the bishop. I continue to tell you little stories, then we will try to draw the conclusions for us. This last year was a very interesting year. You remember we asked for a crusade of the rosaries for the Mass. By the way, I sent it, so to say, I brought the bouquet by a letter to the Pope. Until now, I have not received any answer. Not one word. And I understand. I understand that the Pope cannot give an answer. Well, at least he could, I think, say, I acknowledge that you have sent something. I think that he could do. If he speaks against it, how can you? How can you speak against such a nice gift, some prayers, some rosaries? If he speaks in favor, immediately all the progressists will fall on him and say, oh, you follow now the Lefebvrists, you follow these people, you put yourself under the oppression of these little groups and so on. You no longer care for the universal good of the Church. So I think that probably is blocked there. But well, in October, while we were especially praying these rosaries, something happened in these last 40 years. You will not find 1 month like this month of October where it has been so much spoken about the Tridentine Mass. And that's something very important. One of the tactics of the modernist has been the tactic of forgiveness. we forget it. We no longer speak about it. And suddenly you speak about it. If you speak about it, it's present, it's made present again. It's as if it would be there. Even if there's no motu proprio, there is a fight about it. And the fight is real. Now this fight is very interesting. Why? Because till now, the great, great thing which was said about us was, well, these poor people, they are old-aged, they are dinosaurs, they are only speaking and hoping about the past, they are nostalgic, it's a matter of feelings. Suddenly, it's totally different. Suddenly, why can this Mass not be freed? Because it's a threat to Vatican II. In the answers given even by Rome to our petition about this Mass, we have said, you see, that has been always our position in dealing with Rome. One of the line of attack was to say, we don't trust you. It might appear as not very sympathetic to start like that, when you have somebody who comes to you and says, I want to offer you something good. But okay, it was a possible approach, and that's the one we have chosen, in order to force them to show themselves. Because it's absolutely true, we don't trust them. It's very clear. Does not mean that in between their intention there might be also a good one, but it's not the only one. And by saying so, it's not a total closure, it's not a turning the back, it's an invitation. It's saying, listen, you have mistreated us during so much time, and now you come with offering us something that's very kind from you. But please, it does not correspond to your behavior, so explain why. We want to know why. We are ready to accept that the Church changes its position towards us, of course. If the Church wants to be kind with tradition, that's very great. But we want it to be true, not tricky. How do we dare to speak like that? Well, the facts. Which facts? Not even ourselves. The very people which have been set up by Rome, who has promised them tradition. We call them Ecclesia Dei people. Amongst them, the Society of St. Peter. Well, the poor Society of St. Peter, they are like, I don't know the name in English, Kobe, the little experimental animals. They are the Kobe's of tradition. Something like that, yes. Why? These last months of October, again October, in France, you have a very interesting development. There's something in the move in the Church with the new Pope. It's true, he tries to do something. In fact, it's something which started a little bit before. In 2003, several cardinals in Rome get together. We have to do something for the tradition. The Church is going down. There's a terrible crisis. There's a decadence. We have to do something, and why not make use of the traditional people? During this meeting, you have two lines of operation, two tendencies which show up. One will say, okay, let's make use of the Society of St. Pius X, like the spine of this new work, and let's conglomerate around this spine all the others. Society of St. Peter, Christ the King, well, all the ecclesiarchy, indulged masses and so on, everybody under and around the Society of St. Pius X. Well, that would be very something challenging, but anyway, that's the line. Second line say, forget about the Society of St. Pius X, they will never come. No, let's set up the Society of St. Peter, Christ the King, all these others, and let's eat little by little the Society of St. Pius X. That's 2003. And since then, they are at work in the Vatican in order to set up a certain type of jurisdiction for the people who want the old Mass, in order to set up something which will be independent from the local bishops, because these local bishops are behaving so badly against the poor people who want the old Mass. Now that's the work, 2 years of work under John Paul II, the last years of his pontificate. And now, guess what? One of those who have worked the most in that new project becomes the Pope. And pretty quickly, this project is announced to the French bishops. The idea would be to set up a certain number of apostolic administrations, that is, a bishop for a certain territory, for the people who want the old Mass, indulged Mass, this type of Masses, and especially these communities like St. Peter, Christ the King. One for France, probably one for South America, in Europe, Germany, maybe. The United States, I don't know how far the project was for the United States, but in France it was very far. So far that Rome announced the project to the French bishops. We know the thing from direct source. We know the thing from Rome, who told us, and we know the thing from bishops in France. So it's not hearsay. It's absolutely certain that there was, I say there was, a project to set up an independent entity, independent from the bishops, for fostering the tradition in the Church, into brackets. That is, forget the Society of St. Pius X. And so, what did the French bishops do when this was announced to them? Different actions at different levels. On one level, which is the meeting of the bishops every 2 times a year, twice a year, they meet together and they make declarations. So last spring, the Cardinal Ricard, who is the president of the bishops of France, made a declaration in which he said that it was not acceptable to set up an independent jurisdiction from the bishops in France for the tradition. So the bishops refused the Roman project. But it's not only what they did also something else. One of the bishops wanted to speak with one of our priests to know how far, how deep the tradition is established. He told clearly, we want to do something for the tradition. We want to do something in our own diocese, in order to make the Roman project void. They have only one fear, is that something would get out of their claws, of their government. And that's why they are suddenly doing something for the tradition. Now, what are they doing? In the diocese. And how do they manage to do so? Thanks to a very special circumstance which happens in the Society of St. Peter. In the year 2000, Cardinal Castrillon decapitated the Society of St. Peter. He kicked out of office Father Bisig, because Father Bisig refused to allow to the priest to celebrate the new Mass. That's to his credit. And he put in place someone who was much more open, liberal. Now this liberal, which was for a time the District Superior of the United States for the Society of St. Peter, for the Fraternity of St. Peter, Father de Villers. Father de Villers set up in France, at all the important places, people who were alike, who were ready to say the new Mass. Now we have a new superior who is more severe, more strict, who would like the priest in the Fraternity of St. Peter to say only the old Mass. And so he wants to remove from office these double-sided priests who are in responsibility, especially in France, and who are in responsibility in the most important places of the Society of St. Peter. Already 1 year before the election, Father de Villers knew that he would not be elected. There was a too big majority on the other side. And so he had at least 1 year to prepare an exit, an interesting one. On the first Sunday of October, in their greatest parish in Lyon, suddenly the priest, 3 on 5, those who were in charge, were no longer priests of the Fraternity of St. Peter, but of the diocese. Nothing changed. The only thing was that this church, in which the people had come, was no longer a church for the Society of St. Peter, but a church of the diocese. To the point that the 2 remaining priests who were still priests of the Society of St. Peter were forbidden to celebrate the Mass in that church from one day to the other. The faithful tried to react, tried to protest, and finally the cardinal gave them another church 10 miles away from the center of the town, outside, in the former seminary which the cardinal managed to close. The former seminary of the Society of St. Peter. They are doing the same in Paris. They are recuperating the big room where they celebrate the Mass. It's already done. It was in the hands of laymen who were in favor of the Society of St. Peter. Now it's in the hands of an association which is in the hands of the bishop. The priests there are still St. Peter, but they are working with the bishop. And they are taking control of all the parish in such a way that on one day, from one day to the other, they have the whole control. And the Society of St. Peter is out. Very clever, very clever. At the same time, the Society of St. Pius X, plus these societies who basically want the Tridentine Mass, they start to represent a strength which the bishops can no longer oversee. It's very simple. Now, every year, if you look at the ordinations, 1 priest on 5 ordained in France is ordained for the Old Mass. Already now, 1/5 of the French priests are ordained for the Old Mass. Well, the bishops must respect that. They can no longer avoid it. The more all these societies, they have some vigor, they want something from the religion, they are not dying, they are alive, they are growing. Not exactly what happens in the diocese. I think the record must be in France. In France, I hear many times the parish priest is in charge of 10 parishes, 12, 15, 20, 30, 32. Recently, I have heard something. I think it could be the record. I'm not absolutely sure because I don't know all the situations. A 65-year-old priest has been appointed as a vicar to an 84-old parish priest who is in charge of 92 villages, towns. I don't know whether we dare to say parishes. 92. It's in the Diocese of Chartres. Well, when you come to such figures, you just think it's done. What can they do? That's the situation. And of course, when in the diocese you see this reality, and on the other hand, the Society of St. Pius X would come there with these young priests jumping around like deers. Well, it does not make the bishops very happy. In Bordeaux, I remember the Vicar General say to our priest, well, you in your chapel, you have 700 faithful every Sunday. We in the cathedral, we have 70. Real figures. The Cardinal, President of the Bishops' Conference in France, said it this way. 10 years ago, the French bishops thought that tradition was a dying being. It was going to die its good death. Forget it. Now, they are obliged to include the tradition in their ecclesiastical horizon. We are part of the picture, if I may say so. We are part of their picture. And of course, it's not that they are in favor of tradition, it's that in order not to lose everything, they see that they have to compose with it. And right now, we have a situation in France which is very special. Because on one hand, you have this decline of the official church. You have this coming of tradition, which is, well, mighty. And you have a rise which is threatening, really threatening, of the Islam. Very, very serious. And at the same time, the state, who stole the churches in 1905, but which means who has to take care of the maintaining of these churches, sees that the churches are empty. And they say to the bishops, please, it's the community which pays for maintaining these buildings. So if you have no use for them, we are going to take them. Till now, there is a law which grants these buildings to the Catholic Church exclusively. Now there is a great threat, and it's one of the promises of this new president of France, that he will give the churches to the Muslims. But you see, the situation is very complex. Don't think that there is only one side or one element. We are in the middle of a mixture of various elements, and of course we try to do the best out of it, to take the most element we can. We almost got an agreement with the French bishops to get churches for nothing. But bang, it exploded. Well, okay, it didn't work. Well, we will see what's going to happen in the future. We have right now one bishop who is himself trying to find a church for us. Well, things which 10 years ago absolutely did not exist. And you may say, well, why is he doing so? What does he win with it? Well, nothing. So why does he do it? I really don't know. I'm not in his head. He did not say why. We have now, I may say, because of this report of forces, we have the access to the major shrines in France. When we come, we say to the bishops, this day we come, and we get the churches. We get them in Lourdes. We get them in Lisieux. We have them for our masses. In many places, I may say in the most places in the whole world, it's unthinkable that we will be able to celebrate the Mass in one of these Catholic churches. Well, in France, in these major places, it's already done. And we can just expect that, let's say, these things will continue, will expand, but it does not happen just like that. It means a lot of fight. I may say we don't get anything just like that. And at the same time, you have a Pope who has an inclination towards conservatism, towards tradition. The problem is, it's not the only tendency he has, but amongst others, he has that one, which makes, amongst others, that he would like this reintroduction of the Tridentine Mass, which makes also that he would like to see a much more seriousness in the life of the priests. Probably also in the teaching, though there we have a certain problem. But that makes that, for what I know, and probably I don't know everything, I know of 2 recent nominated and already bishops who, before they were bishops, did celebrate the Tridentine Mass regularly. One of them is in France. The bishops refused 2 times his nomination, and finally the Pope said, that's it. The other one is in Germany. So you start to have now bishops, new bishops, who have in their background the Tridentine Mass, which usually also goes with a traditional attitude. Catholic faith, for example, usually. Another one is a recent nomination in Rome, where the Pope imposed to a cardinal, prefect of one of the congregation, a bishop, who is our friend, Another one has also been nominated. These are recent nominations. I don't say any name because they could be burned immediately. And let's say these show that we cannot say the situation is hopeless. It's working, it's coming, little by little. But don't think that it's already the big victory. That's not true. The fight is very, very strong. The word I get from Rome about this motu proprio is that the Pope is under, that's the word, terrible pressures. I don't know what kind of, I don't know the nature of these pressures, but they are terrible. Bishops, cardinals make terrible pressure on the Pope to prevent this motu proprio. Motu proprio, which has been announced so many times. I don't know how many times I've been told it is signed and it will be published on that day. And from people from really close to the Pope. And nothing happened. Well, of course, things happened, but not what we expect. And the last thing I have heard now is something which may indicate that it's getting closer. A letter from Caspar, who hates the Tridentine Mass, and who said, well, we can no longer oppose. It's really the Pope who wants it. Another one which says they have decided to send experts in the field in order to prepare the coming of the motu proprio, which should arrive before the end of the year. Sorry. That's the last I've heard. So, between now and the end of the year. What could you, let's say, I have nothing very serious. That's, let's say, the best I can tell you. That's why I say, don't take it too, don't put yourself under pressure about it. I say, be if I may say. It comes, it will not come. Well, do your life, continue to live. And it comes not, I don't know. We will see. Of course it is of importance, let's say. The very fact that you see such a fight about it means, well, the enemies of the church, they are not in mistake when they fight. They hit the point. If they fight so much, this simple statement that the Mass has never been suppressed, that this Mass is still a Catholic Mass, that's the only thing they are going to say. And it's true. Well, after 40 years, while they have told you that this Mass is prohibited, that it is a sin to go and to say this Mass, suddenly they discover that it has never been prohibited. It's interesting, no? And that's what they are going to say. That this Mass has never been abrogated. And so it's still a Catholic Mass, which means that everybody can say it. And for that, just for that, you have such a fight. Well, realize that really the enemies of the church, they know that it is something important. And if it is something important for the church, we fight for it. I know there are certain people who are fearful of that, saying, well, but what is going to happen? You will have priests, Novus Ordo priests, who will say this Mass, it will be confusion, and there are people who will come to us, and, well, don't fear. try to find these priests and these faithful. Where are you going to find them? There are so few. I think that this whole story will start very slowly. And there will be a real start only if we work with this instrument. If we put pressure, yes, something could happen. This simple freedom, provided it is given, makes that after, let's say, 2 generations, the new Mass is gone. Because there will be a winner. Because the one cannot leave the place to the other. They are incompatible. And if you leave the choice to the faithful and to the priest, at the end there will be only one, and it will be the Tridentine Mass. It's very clear, very clear. And in Rome they know that. And I may say the bishops also know that. I have it in writing. When I asked for the Mass, the first time, by oral, the answer was, well, you know, fundamentally, the Pope does agree that the Mass has never been abrogated. And that hence, every priest can say it. And the top guys in Rome, well, they didn't use that word, but the cardinals in Rome, they agree. The Cardinal Sodano, Secretary of State, Cardinal Ratzinger, the Faith, Cardinal Medina, Liturgy, Cardinal Castrillon, Clergy, Cardinal Herans, that's the legislative text, they all agree. They all agree that this Mass has never been abrogated, and that hence every priest can say it. So you may say, so where's the problem? Well, you know, the secretaries of the dicasteries and the under-secretaries, they don't want. So we cannot give it to you. So that was orally. In writing, I have some faithful and bishops think that if this freedom is given to the old Mass, it will be in disfavor of the new Mass and the Pius and Paul VI and his reform. So to say, the new Mass will be undergraded, will not make the weight, will not be able to face the old Mass. And it's true. It's very clear, it's true. It's a fact. And those who hate the past of the Church hate this Mass, and they know that just if you give it, it's done with these modern things. Well, once again, in a long range. I don't say 2 years, well, I said 2 generations. Some in Rome are more positive, they say 1 generation. That's the way Rome counts. Now, if we speak of little stories, yes, it is true, the Pope wants to also, at the same time, probably later on, make corrections to the new Mass. He wants to make it more Catholic. But there really, I don't know what it means. I've heard that they plan to leave the first part as is. That is, all these lectures, this new calendar and so on. For the offertory, the idea would be to give ad libitum the possibility of saying the old offertory. The canon, they would suppress canon 2 and 4. Now, that was a good year ago. And they are at work in secret. They're bound by secret, those who don't work on that. That's why I don't know exactly what is really happening, but there is something on the go in all secrecy. I can also conclude something from, that's something real, that's no longer secret, which also gives a little bit of hope, is the question of the for all and for many. You may have heard that on the 17th of November last year, a letter has been sent by Rome, by the congregation of the liturgy, to all the presidents of the bishops' conferences in the whole world, saying it's finished with the for all. In the consecration, you have to say for many. It's interesting. What is more interesting is that about only 1/10, even less, of the bishops were in favor of for many. That is, a very, very large majority was in favor of for all. Even in Rome, you have a whole dicasteries, like the one of the faith, who was unanimously in favor of for all. Which means that if suddenly from Rome you have a letter which says from now on you have to correct that, it means that the one who has decided that is really the Pope, and against all. For many, against all, almost. I may say another problem, which is also indicative of the situation of the Church. In this very document it is said that the bishops must prepare the faithful to this change from the for all to the for many, and they have 1.5 to 2 years to prepare for that change. Gee. Because at that time the new Mass will be published. There will be a new publication from Rome. So I just guess that announces other corrections which are not yet announced. It's a guess. I told you we have some problems with the present Pope, and these problems are doctrinal. He's the Pope of the Council. On one hand, he refuses the abuses, let's say the two big abuses. He refuses them, does not want. So he does not want things to go too far. And he condemns that. But on the other hand, he tries to save the Council. And what does he try to save in the Council? He claims the Council in the light of tradition. More precisely, in the light of living tradition. This word living is very, very important. When we say the Council at the light of tradition, we even indicate that could be a correct way to present the way we would accept the Council, that is in the light of tradition. We have a big problem because Rome, when they say tradition, they don't say the same as we do. And remember that when Archbishop Fellay was condemned because of the consecration of bishops, in the very text they say that the root of this behavior of Archbishop Fellay was a wrong understanding of tradition, was an incomplete notion of tradition. That means that Rome has a more complete, that means another one. So when we use the word in the name of tradition, in fact, we don't speak of the same thing. When we say in the light of tradition, We say the tradition, that is the past of the church, what the church has always taught everywhere, all the time. This you cannot avoid, go around. That's the imposing, that's the norm. And so you take this council and you look, does it fit this norm or not? What is in harmony with it, we accept. That is what the church has always said, of course, we accept, no problem. What is dubious, what is curious, what is strange, we will say, if there is a Catholic way to understand it, this tradition, okay, but only that way. And if there is something which is clearly opposed, forget it. Just garbage, finish. Rome, the Pope, when he says the Council of the Light of Tradition, does not say this at all. When Archbishop Lefebvre explained this way of understanding, he got a letter from Cardinal Ratzinger, who told him, we don't accept that. And we're still there. That's why I say to Rome, no, I'm not going to sign that we accept the Council of the Light of Tradition. Because it's an ambiguous term. It can be understood the right way, but Rome understands it another way. So we're gone for another round there. We don't want that. Must be clear for all. So what does the Pope understand when he says at the light of living tradition? I say everything is in the word living, not in tradition, living. You have to know that this question of tradition, living tradition, is for the Pope one of his life questions. All his life he has been focusing this idea of a tradition which is evolving. And instead of evolving, they say living. You see, when you say tradition, every word with "tion," T-I-O-N, means an action. And you can look at tradition also in a way of action. That is, if we can speak of tradition, that means something is transmitted. If something is transmitted, there is a transmitter, there is a transmission. And in fact, it's true, yes, well, that's the job of the bishops of the church to transmit. St. Paul says, I have transmitted what I have received. Archbishop Lefebvre says, I have transmitted what I have received. So there is a transmission, there's an act of transmitting. And this is the living part of tradition. You give, again, the same which you have received, further. But now, if you have such a concept, where you only look at the way of transmitting, and you forget what is transmitted, or if you put the weight, the overweight, on the action of transmitting, and no longer look at what is transmitted, then you have a big problem, and I may say that's the present Pope's problem. Living tradition for the present Pope means the Pope himself. What is living tradition? Well, Benedict XVI, who tells us today something about the past of the Church. That's it. His way of looking at this past, his way of giving us something from this past of the Church, that's the living tradition. And if this which is delivered to us does not correspond to the past, we have a big problem. And that's exactly the problem we have with the present Pope. Because after having said that the only way to interpret the Vatican II is in the light of this living tradition, he tells us what we have to accept. And what do we have to accept? We have to accept a new definition of the relation between the faith and modern science. What does this mean? Well, maybe we should dig in it. It means a new definition of the relation between the Church and the state. The Council calls that religious liberty. We are fighting that since the start. It means a new relation between the Church and the other religions. We call it ecumenism, interreligious meetings. We are fighting that since the start. It means a new relation between, new definition of the relation between the Catholic Church and Judaism. And there we get crazy. We are just wondering, what are they doing there? Why do they care so much about the Jews? Well, the Jews are people like others. They refuse our Lord, okay? The Muslims also refuse our Lord. That's it. Why suddenly start to say that they can save themselves just by following their path? Doesn't make sense. Or why suddenly make a complex to the Catholics? Because, yes, it is a tragedy. Hitler has persecuted these Jews during the Second World War. Why put the burden on the Catholic Church? It's wrong, it's false. Hitler has persecuted as well the Catholic Church. You have thousands of priests who have died in the concentration camps. Why don't we speak about that? The father of Archbishop Lefebvre has died in a concentration camp. My grandfather was Swiss. He was on the blacklist of Hitler. And so we absolutely disagree with what Hitler does and did, and we don't need to be, so to say, Jew for that. It's falsifying history to focus on this, let's say, on the story of the Jews. Yes, it was something horrible to make this massacre of the Jews, but that's not the whole history of Hitler. He was really a bad guy, not only because of the Jews. And so why is the present Pope doing so much in that direction of the Jews? It's very curious, very strange. Very strange. It's like a complex. Maybe because he's German, that's possible. Maybe because he feels that there's a depth there, but he's not Hitler. And I'm sure that as a priest, as a seminarian, he was definitely against him. So, well, let's say, belongs to the mysteries we are facing. I may say we don't have all the answers. There are many, many things which we have just to take as they come and, let's say, do our job as Catholics, and that's it. How long will this crisis last? I have no idea. I'm ready to tell you, well, no longer so long. Because I know, like St. Peter, that for God 1 day is like 1,000 years. Now, I don't know whether you're happy with that answer. We could also say, Because when things go really bad, it means that we are almost at the end of the bad time. Because there is a good Lord, and a good Lord who is not going to let his church be demolished totally, who made the promise that the gates of hell will not prevail, and so we will be forced, I may say, by the circumstances to say, now that's it, stop here. But how will he do that? He can, strictly speaking, he can repeat the miracle of the storm on the sea. But usually that's not the way he works. He can do it. He is mighty enough to do it. And maybe he will do it for one time. But what we have learned from history till now is that he does not work this way. He works on a much more gentle way, if I may say so, which means conversion little by little, and then with a certain acceleration, come back. A crisis in the church lasts usually 70 years. That can give you a hint. As I say, usually, it's not mathematical, of course, but it's about that. And guess what? When this crisis will be over, there will be another one. Something else, but something. Why? Because our church, our dear mother, has a name, which is Militant Church, which means that till the end of the world, we will have to fight on one way or the other. We dream of peace. We dream of triumph. We have this promise at the end, my Immaculate Heart shall triumph. What did the Blessed Mary say, Virgin Mary say when she said that? A short time of peace shall be given after the triumph. A short time of peace. And we would like this time of peace to be long. Well, we'll have a triumph. Yes, we will have a triumph. And then we go back to work. That's our life on earth. It belongs, I may say, to the divine plan of God about us, about the history of the church of salvation. There is a devil. This devil is an angel. He does not even need to sleep. He's constantly at work, and he hates God and all those who want to serve him. And God allows him to do some harm. But what is fantastic is that he cannot do more harm than what God allows him to do. And this is true for the devil, and this is true for any enemy and evil doer here on earth. We know that whatever evil happens always with the permission of God. Nothing can happen on earth without this green light of God. And when God allows something evil to happen, he fixes the limit, the amount of evil. He's really in control. We have a little pain to understand that because we see our freedom, we see the freedom of man and so on. God is in total, absolute control of whatever happens. And nevertheless, there is freedom. Well, it's really difficult to grasp that, but it's true. Both are true. Never, never, never a creature will be able to do more harm than what God allows. And you know, and you allow me to remember that to you, that it goes up to your hair. Even your hair cannot jump out of your head without his permission. You don't lose one hair without the permission of God. It shows you how far it goes. Speak about control. And this control of God does not hurt our freedom. That's really amazing, but that shows how great God is. And then, of course, comes the famous objection, but how can God allow such a thing if He's so good? He's perfect, He's perfectly good. So, from perfect goodness, you expect only goodness. How can the evil happen then? God is so great that if and when He allows evil, it's because out of it He will produce a greater good.